So outside of like the things we're seeing like in our work lives,
Mm-hmm.
over the past year, we've seen some evolution of the services too. Has any of those stood out, like the speed of getting this deployed and
Yeah. So one of the things that I think has been, um, I'll talk about transformative technologies quite a bit. I think what I'm going to use Microsoft, but AWS has a good one as well, and it's Microsoft uses either Logic Apps or Power Automate. They have a really, really nice workflow request response type activity. That says, hey, here's a trigger, do a thing. And the implementation and integration of Azure Logic Apps, Power Automate, used to be called Microsoft Flow, but it's now Power Automate. And overall, that Power Platform from Microsoft has been, I think, in the last year, it's been completely transformed from what used to be a weird conversation that I really didn't like to have to this is now the conversation that I want to have because I can get you reporting faster. I don't have to set up servers. I can get you access to data sources faster. I don't need to set up brokers or data gateways or anything like that. I can get you the information in front of your eyeballs faster because I've got templated out Power BI reports that I know you're looking for from a sales point of view, or if you're in a healthcare space, an EHR point of view, to interact with a Fire connector. So all of those things I think have been helped push the needle more to platform, which is where you have to end up, and less to the physical server infrastructure or the VM infrastructure in someone else's data center. I love Logic Apps. It's probably, if you ask me, I've learned a lot of new technologies over the last year. Just to rattle them off, it's been Kubernetes. It's been Kubernetes and Docker together. It's been Angular. I've learned how to write web pages. Learned some .NET and C# inside of it. Learned a lot of Logic Apps and Power Automate. I've learned Power BI and the DAX languages. If you ask me, out of everything I've learned in the last year, and I've now become what I would say is a really, really good PowerShell scripter. Out of everything that I've learned in the last year, because I'm stuck in my house all the time and I'm an extrovert, so I have to do something. I would say that the number one thing that I've loved to learn about is Azure Logic Apps. It allows me to create if I need to, an HTTP trigger, or I can create a REST API without knowing how to write C# code. I can create a REST API, or I can create a trigger that aligns with when a table gets updated in SQL Server, send an email. So now I can integrate with HubSpot. I can integrate with Microsoft Forms or Dynamics, or our own internal ticketing system. If a ticket gets created, do this logic or this workflow. It's atomic. It's when a trigger happens, do this thing. But I mean, that's awesome. If I have many of them happening at one time, it might not be the right thing for a Logic App. That might be a conversation where a function comes into play, where it's still atomic, but it's request response. It's one then the other. And if it goes longer, if I have a large set of data that I have to process, maybe that becomes Azure Batch. But to know that there's this workflow that I can integrate with either a function or a batch service has been incredible. I mean, it is actually really genuinely change the way that I work. I'm working on a Logic App workflow right now that provisions network infrastructure in Azure. So I'm taking an app platform with nothing other than an Angular form that we've written, that when I hit submit, it doesn't go to an API. It doesn't go to anything like that. It goes to an Azure Logic App. And we have some logic and some checking and some other things that all go into play. But when that happens, we can now flip that and go, okay, here's what the activity has got to happen is. And, is it case A, B, C, D, E, F, G? And then we can start to do some switching and some variable setting and all that other fun jazz to get to the point where it says this successfully terminated. Good job. That's really been the most fun for me personally to look at. It's also, I think, because Azure Logic Apps is kind of the enterprise or the corporate side of it. It's also for me kind of transformed using Power Automate, because I use Power Automate. I get a weather forecast every day. Why? Well, because I want to know what the weather is. But at 8 o'clock every morning, there's a trigger that happens, and the logic says, go to the National Weather Service, connect to the API. Here's my GPS coordinates. Tell me my weather. Tell me what the weather forecast is. And that's just one thing, but there's some cool integration for me personally because of that might be now at the end of every day. Tell me what my meetings are for the next day, so it can look into my calendar, so I can take an hour and prep for the next day. I can make sure I have everything I need, things like that. So that's where Power Automate is focused on. I always tell people Power Automate is focused on me. Azure Logic Apps are focused on the company. They're the same engine. So whatever whatever's going on, I can use that capability on both sides of it. So.
You pointed out something that's very important there. Power Apps is focused on me versus the Logic Apps on the corporation.
Yep.
In fact, that's something people should probably remember is that Power Apps is so focused on the individual that it's tied to that individual's account. So don't base some of those business rules on an individual unless you plan on keeping them forever.
We have learned this inside of Stratum. There are more Power Automate or Microsoft flows, now Power Automate workflows, than I care to admit that are assigned to any number of people inside of this company that do company-wide things. And we're in the process of, hopefully, I'm saying this and I'm knocking on wood, we're hopefully in the process of now identifying those, because it's easy. And that's the best part about it is it's easy. It's also the worst part of it, that it's so easy that you really become dependent on Aaron's workflow to send emails to customers on the third Tuesday of every month. Suddenly now if Aaron leaves and I disable his account, that workflow gets abandoned and our customers no longer receive those emails. And that might be a bad thing for customer experience, customer engagement, etc.
So one of the things that, maybe it's because I work so close on it, is that Windows Virtual Desktop. I hate to go back to that again, but frankly, the amount of change to that has been shocking, to say the least.
Yeah.
When even a year ago we started off and it was strictly PowerShell driven. If you wanted to deploy WVD, you better have your scripts ready or your step-by-step, enter this PowerShell command.
Yeah, copy-paste, a lot of copy-paste.
And then then there were third-party solutions that became popular, trying to fill in the gaps. And now Microsoft we got ARMS and everything else that we can just deploy.
Yep. And that's, I'm going to say, that's been probably, as we kind of, again, going back to the top list of things that have changed, number one, I think, is without a doubt the conversation around conferencing tool sets and the expectation around conferencing. Number two to me is that corporate desktop experience. And when you do number three, there's a lot of number threes, or 3, 4, and 5. At any given point in time, they might. But I think security is a part of that. But when provisioning those virtual desktop infrastructure has been, and there's some good third parties out there. You want to be able to rapidly provision, integrate with a bunch of things. There's some good third party tool sets out there. And Microsoft is always looking at what's the 80%. What 80% of the features that those third party tool sets are capable of doing, Microsoft's going to include in the platform. And I'm making that number up. I don't know what it is. worst thing in the world for me would be to have Mark Rusinovich call me and go, well, technically, and he's a really smart guy and knows way more about what's going on inside of Microsoft than I am, and then I do. But I use an 80% rule. If you look at what the marketplace can bear as like feature sets, expect Microsoft to do 80% of them. That was kind of the rule set when I worked there. I mean, when I was there for almost 5 years. When I worked there, it was expect Microsoft to be able to handle about 50% or 80% of the features that were out there. You see that in the Hyper-V versus VMware conversation. You see that in the hyper-converged infrastructure of Azure Stack versus something like Nutanix. What you see in that environment is in that hyper-converged environment, or the VMware versus Hyper-V, or the VDI versus or Azure Windows Virtual Desktop versus some of the third parties that are out there. They're great tool sets. I don't want to take anything away from it, but to answer, do I need all of that or do I need 80% of it? I will also say that I think that's been a big change that we've had is people no longer have to have the best; they have to have the just good enough. Because they know that just good enough is going to be evolving over time. And that just good enough allows us in a lot of cases to that just good enough allows us to meet the immediate hurdle that we have. And in the last year, companies have had to do a lot of defensive budget strategy, jump a lot of big hurdles, put off retiring technical debt. And if you can retire a fraction of technical debt, but you do that maybe every month or every 2 months or 3 months versus big budget purchase every 6 years, you'll actually retire it a lot faster. Small fractional bits incrementally still will retire that technical debt a lot faster.
Thank you for watching Stratum's Cloud Interrupted. If you like what you see, please subscribe, like, and share this video.